Okay, so this video is going to be a little bit different than the others. I'm going to try and do this in one take if possible, or at least in as few takes as possible, because this is going to be more of a kind of a application concept example. So the purpose of this video is we're going to be looking at a prompt here, which is input validation. So we're going to have some user ID, which is defined right here, and we can change this and add whatever we want to the string. And the purpose of the program is going to be to validate this user input. And so the criteria is up here. So the user ID must be greater than or equal to 10 characters. Then we have some string parsing, which is going to involve the user ID cannot have any alphabetical characters in it. So we're going to have to do some special parsing to ensure that that's not the case. And then we have two interesting conditions down here, which is we must sum all of the evenly positioned digits in the user ID together, and that sum must be equal to or greater than 20. And then we have another kind of similar prompt down here, which says we must sum all oddly positioned digits in the user ID together, and then that sum must be equal to or greater than 15. So let's start off with the easiest one, which is just checking the user ID length. So I'm going to come down here, and we can just say if user ID dot length is less than, what was it, 10? So it must be greater than or equal to 10, which means if it's less than 10, then it's invalid. So we can say system.out.print user ID is invalid, must be equal to or actually I'm just gonna say too short. And then if the user ID is not less than 10, then that means that it's equal to or greater than 10. So we can just say else system.out.print user ID length is valid. And so that's all we need to do for our checking conditions here. And I should also just mention that for each validation, I'm going to have a print statement for the valid version and the invalid version, just so that we can kind of see or have a better idea of what's actually going on here. So I'm just going to run this real quick just to make sure I didn't mess anything up here. We have user ID is invalid, it's too short. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 digits here. Let's add 2 more. And if I run this, now we have user ID length is valid. So now let's move on to the user ID cannot have any alphabetical characters. So this one is a little bit more involved. I believe what we would usually use regex or regular expressions to make a check like this, which you can find the link to in the description. It's a little bit beyond the scope of the video, but that's normally how we would do a check like this. Anytime you're dealing with string manipulation or string parsing, you are almost always going to use regular expressions once we start getting into how those work. But anyways, without using regular expressions, the most optimal way to do this is probably just to use a for loop and then check every single individual character to make sure that they are not alphabetical. So let's come down here and let's make a variable called, we'll say, has no alphabetical. And we'll just set that to, false by default. Actually, this is what we'll do. We'll change this to has alphabetical. Yeah. So we're going to say that by default, we're going to assume that the string has no alphabetical characters. And then we're going to make a for loop that is going to check and see if it does have alphabetical characters. So I'll make a standard for loop, just starting from 0, starting from 0 while I is less than user ID length. Increase I by 1 every iteration. And we can just go ahead and index each character at index I as the loop cycles through. So we'll say, yeah, we want to get every individual character. So we'll make a variable called character. We'll just call it character. And we're going to grab the user ID at index of I. And so now we can check and see whether or not each individual character is a letter. And if it is a letter, then we want to change our has alphabetical variable up here to true. And that's going to be our indicator later on that our input is invalid. Because if this is true, then our input is invalid. So we'll say if, now there's a few ways to do this. In this video, I'm just going to use the character dot, character dot get numeric value method. Or I'm sorry, not get numeric value. We want to do character dot is letter. Yeah, the character dot is letter method will return true if the character that we pass to it is an alphabetical character. If we pass a character that contains a digit to this method, then it'll return false. So we'll say if that's true, then our has alphabetical will be true, and we can break out of the for loop because we don't need to do any more checking in the rest of our loop, because we just care about if there's at least one alphabetical character. So after this loop, we can then make an if statement here, and we can say if has alphabetical, then system.out.print, we'll say user ID is invalid, cannot contain alphabetical characters. But if it's false, then we'll just say user ID is valid, does not contain any alphabetical characters. So let's go ahead and test this real quick. If I run this program, we should see user ID length is valid and user ID is valid does not contain alphabetical characters. But if let's say I replace one of these with the letter G, and then I run this program, then you see we have user length is valid, but now user length is invalid for our second condition, because it now detected that we have a G in here, and so it says we cannot have any alphabetical characters in our string. So it looks like that's working just fine. And so that's all we have to do for our second criteria. And now for the trickier ones, which is going to be essentially we want to get a pattern of evenly positioned digits in our input and oddly positioned digits in our input. So let's go below these lines now, and let's set up a validation check for evenly positioned digits. So again, we'll probably use a for loop for this. Even with regular expressions, I think we would still use a for loop in this case, since it's a little bit more particular. So we'll make a for loop starting at 0, and we'll say, well, I is less than, what did I call it? User ID dot length I plus plus. Now for evenly positioned digits, that's going to include, I'm going to go ahead and replace this with a number again real quick. So when we say evenly positioned digits, in this case, I'm going to assume what we're talking about is we want to start at this number 4 right here. So essentially, we want to start at what our relative position is in the string from our perspective. So obviously in your program, this number 4 right here is at an index of 1 in the string, but we want to treat this as a position of 2, right? So that's going to be important because we have to actually start counting at some value, right? And if we start counting at 0, then it's going to, and then we increment by 2 every single time to get every other digit or every even digit, then it's going to start at 3 and then go to 5 and then go to 3, when in reality we want it to start at 4 and then go to 8 and then go to 7 and so on. So we actually don't want to start our for loop at 0 in this case to get all the evenly positioned digits. We actually want to start it at 1. And instead of increasing our for loop incrementer by 1 every single time, we want to increase it by 2 every single time. So while this loop is running, every single cycle of the loop, we're going to be incrementing I by 2 so that we're getting every other number. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's see what we have here if we do this. I'm going to go ahead and make a character variable. So we'll say character is equal to user ID dot char at index I. And we're just going to go ahead and print whatever that result is. System.out.print, and we'll print character. And if I run this, then we get 48726, which is exactly what we want, right? So we want it to start at 4 and then give us 8 and then 7 and then 2 and then 6. So that is working perfectly. And we have a little bit more information in our prompt. So for all evenly positioned digits, we want to sum them together and make sure they're equal to or greater than 20. So we're going to need a variable to keep track of the sum of these digits. And so the first thing we'll need to do is make a variable for that. So I'll say int sum of even digits, and we'll just initialize that as 0. And the next thing we'll have to do is convert our character to whatever the integer type inside of our character actually is. And so this is where I was saying before how we could do that whole like user ID that character at minus the 0 character thing. We could do something like that. I would prefer to use the get numeric value method of the actual character class. So yeah, so that's one way of converting a character to an integer if the character contains a digit, is we can say int digit is equal to character dot get numeric value, and then pass the character that we want to get the numeric value of. So in this case, that's character. And yeah, so digit get numeric value of character. And yeah, and so we already know that it's going to be every even digit. So this one's pretty simple. We can just say sum of even digits and then add that evenly placed digit to it. So that's all good. And then so this will be our first condition here. And then we have our final condition, which is sum all oddly positioned digits in the user ID together, and that must be equal to or greater than 15. So we can pretty much do the exact same thing as we did here. So I'm going to copy and paste this. The only difference is for oddly placed digits, we're going to want to start counting our oddly placed digits at this number 3 right here, right, which is at position 0 in the string. And then from position 0, we're going to want to get every other digit, right? So that'll be every odd digit from the perspective of us reading the string. And so I think all we'll have to do in this case is just start I at 0 instead of 1. And so that's that's pretty much it. And then we'll just call this sum of odd digits. And of course, in our for loop here, we're going to want to increase our sum of odd digits for this counter. And I'm not sure why the use of the local variable blah blah is not used. Oh yeah, that's fine. This should go away once we actually use the variable. So I'll just go ahead and label this oddly positioned digits. And let's go ahead and just console log, wrong language. Let's go ahead and system print these sums here. So we'll say sum of evenly positioned digits, sum of even digits, and the same thing for the odd ones. Sum of odd digits. So if we run this, I'm just going to go ahead and make a prediction really quick. For the evenly positioned digits, we have 4 and 8, that's 12. 12 plus 7 should be 19. 19 plus 2 should be 21, and 21 plus 6 should be 27. So we should have 27 for that, and I'm just going to trust whatever we get for this. I'll count afterwards. Okay, and this should be a print line, not just a regular print, but it looks like we did get the value of 27 there. So for evenly positioned ones, we have 27, and then for odd, we have 21. So 3 plus 5 is 8, plus 3 is 11, plus 3 is 14, plus 7 is 21. Yeah, cool. And I think that's all of our criteria. Oh yeah, then we just have to check and make sure that these sums meet these values here. So, so we'll say if sum of even digits is greater than, what is it, 20? The sum must be equal to or greater than 20. So if it's equal to or greater than or equal to 20, then system.out.print user ID is valid. Otherwise, we'll just print user ID is invalid. Even sums are incorrect. And then we can copy and paste this for the odd digit sum. So sum of odd digits, and this sum must be equal to or greater than 15. So we'll come down here, say if it's equal to or greater than 15, then user ID is valid. I'm going to go ahead and add a correct even sum up here so we know what it's in relation to. Odd, or I'll say correct odd sum for this one. And if it's invalid, then we get user ID is invalid, odd sums are incorrect. All right, and we'll just get rid of, well, actually I'll keep this so that we can actually see what the final sums are. And it looks like it should pass both of these because 27 and 21 are both greater than 20 and 15. So if I run this, everything should pass, which it looks like it does. Right, so the user length is valid, doesn't contain any alphabetical characters, the correct even sum, the correct odd sum, and then this is what the sums are. So I can force a invalid case for the oddly positioned digits real quick. So I can just, let's turn this 5 into a 1, which should turn this to be 16. And then let's change this 3. Actually, yeah, let's change this 3 to a 1, which should put us below 15. So now if I run this, let's see. Oh, no, it gives us exactly 15. So let's change another one. 1, 3, 5, 7. Let's change this 3 to a 1. Okay, so now I lowered the value of some of the oddly placed digits, and so now their sum is below 15, to which we can see that here it now failed the validation for that portion of the program. So that is working just fine. And I guess I can try this for the even one too. I'm just going to change everything to 1 here. I'm not even going to pay attention to what I'm affecting. But it should fail for both of these cases now. So now both of these summations fail because they don't meet the quantity threshold. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go ahead and call it for this input validation example here. I'm going to have the link to all of this code in the description of the video if you want to take a closer look at it or change some things around. But yeah, the main purpose of this video was just to cover some input validation criteria points here, just for, I don't know, educational purposes. So hopefully this was helpful in some kind of way. But yeah, I'm going to end the video there, and thanks for watching.